Thank you all for joining us today. The panel last met on November 6th, 2023, where 2 meetings were held. So as a reminder, the August 2023 meeting was rescheduled to the morning of November 6th, following an emergency proclamation of extreme weather. The rescheduled August meeting included updates on Biomonitoring California program activities, including PFAS detection methods in serum and plasma. The panel also considered the expansion of the PFAS's designated chemical group. The panel voted unanimously to recommend that the chemical group perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFASs, and other substances with carbon-fluorine bonds be included as designated chemicals for Biomonitoring California. In making this recommendation, panel members highlighted the importance of capturing exposure potential of chemicals with carbon-fluorine bonds through biomonitoring data, the benefits of increased flexibility for the program to identify exposures to chemicals with carbon-fluorine bonds through non-targeted analyses, and the need for the program to carefully review the chemical properties and exposure data specific to individual chemicals in this group when determining which chemicals to include in future biomonitoring studies. So that was the first meeting, or the August meeting. So then this next meeting on the afternoon of November 6th, the SGP met for the regularly scheduled November meeting. The meeting included updates on AB 617 community biomonitoring studies, including results from the Stockton Air Pollution Exposure Project, or SAPEP. Key discussion topics included evaluating the impact of the swamp cooler filters and portable air cleaners installed at participants' homes during the Fresca Mujeres study, and the potential for follow-up with study participants. Topics related to SAPEP included interpretation of the data for biomarkers of oxidative stress and inflammation, interpreting the 2 naphthalene results in urine samples, databases to help identify potential sources of naphthalene or carbaryl in the Stockton area. And lastly, key concepts to communicate to participants and the larger community when sharing study findings. So the summaries and transcripts of both of these meetings are posted on their respective meeting pages on the program's website at biomonitoring.ca.gov. I also want to take the time to recognize that during the COVID-19 pandemic, Biomonitoring California turned 15. Now that we are meeting in person again, we are taking the opportunity to celebrate at a reception here at Dharma College following this meeting's conclusion. To those of you attending today's meeting in person or tuning in from nearby, we hope you will join us. There will be some toasts and brief remarks at the event, but I thought I would highlight some of the key accomplishments of the program in its first 15 years. These include conducting nearly 30 studies in almost 8,000 Californians looking at chemicals such as metals, phenols, PAHs, and PFASs, collaborating with over 50 community organizations to understand how biomonitoring can address exposure concerns in their communities and designing studies to identify unequally exposed subpopulations, maintaining and updating the lists of designated and priority chemicals to keep up with the constantly growing numbers of chemicals of concern on the market, developing over 35 chemical fact sheets, including lead, organophosphate, pesticides, and BPA in multiple languages. And lastly, upholding the program's mandate to return biomonitoring results to participants in a culturally and linguistically appropriate way so they understand their exposure levels and how to reduce their exposures. On behalf of OEHHA, CDPH, and DTSC, thank you to the Scientific Guidance Panel and to the staff of Biomonitoring California for your continued service to Californians. We look forward to the next 15 years of the program and to seeing you at the celebration. Event details are on the March SGP meeting page. Okay, so before I invite the panel members to introduce themselves, I would like to announce that Amy Padula was appointed by the Speaker of the Assembly, Robert Rivas, as a Scientific Guidance Panel member in January. Amy Padula is an associate professor in the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Science at the University of California, San Francisco. Her expertise is in epidemiologic studies of environmental exposures, social inequalities, and adverse pregnancy outcomes. Dr. Padula was awarded the Outstanding New Environmental Scientist Award from the National Institute of Environmental Health Science to investigate the impacts of wildfires on preterm birth in California. As part of the National Institute of Health's Environmental Influences on Child Health Outcomes, or the ECHO study, she investigated associations between PFASs and other endocrine disrupting chemicals in combination with social stressors during pregnancy and their effects on adverse birth and child health outcomes. She has also worked with the Silent Spring Institute to report back individual chemical exposures to study participants. Dr. Padula received her PhD in epidemiology from the University of California, Berkeley, and completed her postdoctoral training at Stanford University. Welcome, Amy. All right. I should also announce that Meg Schwarzman, who is our SGP chair, will resign as a panel member to give more attention to her many other commitments after this meeting. She was appointed by the Speaker of the Assembly in 2014 and has been an outstanding member of the SGP for the past 10 years. She has been the chair of the panel since 2017. We want to thank Meg for her leadership and guidance and for her service to the people of California. We wish her the very best in her future endeavors. All right, so I will now invite the panel members to introduce themselves by name and affiliation. Let's start with Jose Suarez, who is attending remotely.
Good afternoon. I'm Jose Suarez, Associate Professor in the Division of Climate and Environmental Health within the Herbert Wertheim School of Public Health at the University of California, San Diego.
Great. Thanks, Jose. Carl Krainer.
I'm Carl Krainer, a legal philosopher with an appointment in environmental toxicology at the University of California, Riverside.
Oliver Fien.
Hello, I'm Oliver Fien, professor at the Genome Center at University of California in Davis.
Ulrike Litterer.
Hi, I'm Ulrike Luderer. I'm professor in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health at the University of California, Irvine.
Right. Tom McCone.
I'm Thomas McCone, or Tom, I go by. I'm professor emeritus at the School of Public Health at the University of California, Berkeley, and also a retired affiliate at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory.
Amy Padula.
I'm Amy Padula. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences.
Thank you. And Meg Schwarzman.
Thanks. I'm Meg Schwarzman, faculty at UC Berkeley Environmental Health Sciences Division.
Great. Looks like we have a quorum. So now I will hand this off to panel chair Meg Schwarzman, who will provide more details about this afternoon's meeting.
Thank you, Dave. And it's hard to leave, but we still have today's meeting. And I want to start with meeting logistics. So a reminder to panel members to please comply with Bagley-Keene open meeting requirements, that all discussions and deliberations of the panel and the subject matter that we're dealing with today be conducted during the meeting, not on breaks or with individual members of the panel, either on or offline, including via phone, email, chats, or text messages. Panel members attending remotely must visibly appear on camera during the open portion of the meeting. If you're unable to keep your camera on at any point during the meeting because of technological impracticability, please make an announcement when you turn your camera off. And also, if someone older than 18 is in the room with any panelists attending remotely, you have to disclose the presence of that person and their general relationship to you. So we'll pause for a moment. I think we only have one remote attendee, and you could just confirm whether anyone over 18 is in the room with you, Jose. No one. Thank you very much. Okay. So our panel goals for today, we're going to first hear an update on program activities, including the initial results of a project to assess associations between per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, levels in serum in Southern California adults and the associations with drinking water levels. Later this afternoon, we'll also hear from guest speakers on challenges and opportunities for biomonitoring for oil and gas exposures. 2 topics for today. There will be time for questions from both the panel members and audience after each presentation, and then a separate discussion session for each block. If SGP members wish to speak or ask a question, please just raise your hand if you're in the room and I'll call on you. If online webinar attendees have questions or comments during the question period after each talk, you can submit them via the Q&A feature of the Zoom webinar or by email to biomonitoring@oehha.ca.gov. We won't be using the chat function. Please keep your comments brief and focused on the items under discussion for today, and we'll read aloud relevant comments and paraphrase them if necessary. Online attendees who wish to speak during the public comment periods or discussion sessions, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and Rebecca Beloso will call on you when it's the right time. If you're attending in person and you want to comment during the public comment periods or discussion sessions, please come to the front or raise your hand, and we'll call on you. For the benefit of the transcriber, please clearly identify yourself before providing your comment and write your name and affiliation on the sign-in sheet that's at the back of the room to verify that we have your name right. Okay, I think that's all the meeting logistics, and I want to introduce our first speaker, who is Nerissa Wu, Chief of the Exposure Assessment Section in the Environmental Health Investigations Branch, or EHIB, at the California Department of Public Health. She's the overall lead for Biomonitoring California and will provide an update on current program activities.
One second. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, rather. Good to see you all here. I have 10 minutes for my program update because we have a really packed agenda. So I am going to be going through this kind of super speed, but of course, open to answering questions later on. I'll spend some time talking about our different projects, our surveillance projects, as well as our community-focused work, give you some lab updates, as well as updates to our designated chemical list, and then a brief report back from the National Biomonitoring Network meeting. So starting off with our surveillance work, the CARE study, the California Regional Exposure Study, which biomonitored participants in South and Southeastern California from 2017 to 2019. The data from the CARE study is now being used in 2 analyses looking at the associations between serum PFAS levels and drinking water sources and reported dietary information. And Toki Fillman's going to be talking about this in detail after I speak, so I won't go into any more detail. We are just initiating analyses of the metal data and potential exposure sources. So any suggestions on associations to investigate are welcome. In addition to information on participant residence and demographics, we also have information on their home characteristics, drinking water habits, diet, occupation, hobbies, smoking, reproductive history, and more. In addition to these things, our lab is also working to generate speciated arsenic and phenols data so that we'll have population data for those panels. We have scheduled an open webinar for the CARE study to present study findings publicly, and that's on April 18th. And we'll be sending out information on this webinar to our website listserv, to all study participants, and to our general mailing list. So if you don't typically get mail from us and you're interested in this webinar, please reach out to us and we'll get the information to you. The report is available in both English and Spanish, and it's ready to post on our website in the next few days. Also on surveillance, we have our 2 biobank-based surveillance projects, MAMAs and STEPS, both of which use prenatal screening samples from the genetic disease screening program. MAMA has samples from 2012, 2015, and 2016 from different parts of the state, as shown on the map. And samples from that study were analyzed either for POPs or for PFASs. We did not have any samples for which both analyses were run. So the summary statistics for MAMAs have been posted on the web. MAMAs 2 and 3 are in the queue and will be posted soon. And we've done some analyses of the data and found that, as expected, consistent with national data, the general PFAS levels are going down between 2012 and 2016, but there are some exceptions. PFUNDA and PFDA did not really change during this time, so that's a little bit different. And also for PFBS, the 4-carbon PFAS, it went up slightly in MAMAs 3. It's hard to know what that means. These are in different geographic areas, but it's something to keep an eye on for STEPS. And STEPS is the follow-up to MAMAs, for which we have representative samples from Orange and Fresno counties from 2015, 2018, and 2021. So we've got 1,000 samples for STEPS in the queue at the lab. And we're happy to report that we're successful in developing a protocol with the Genetic Disease Biobank that we're using to save samples from the 2024 pregnancies from Los Angeles County. So for Orange and Fresno counties, we selected samples from the pool of eligible participants because we already had information from the birth record. But because LA County is not part of Biobank, and the samples are discarded after they undergo prenatal screening, we're grabbing them now from the 2024 pregnancies. We're oversampling because of this. And then once we have the birth record in 1 to 2 years, we'll apply our eligibility criteria, and that will give us a parallel group of samples from Los Angeles, giving us a comparison across 3 counties. And our plan is to continue sampling in 2024 and 2027. So we have this nice temporal trend across 3 counties. Moving on to our community-focused studies and the ACE project, which is focused on the Chinese and Vietnamese communities in San Francisco and San Jose. The analyses of the questionnaire data has been focused on fish consumptions, and we have some very important results, strong associations between fish consumption and serum PFAS levels, depending on the types of fish and the fish parts consumed, have associations with 6 different PFASs from 9 to 124%. Depending again on what kind of fish and the fish parts that are consumed. We have shared results with state and federal partners, and the evidence of this elevated serum level for this community, as well as the information on fish consumption, has been really compelling. It's generated some very important conversations about fish advisories and how to protect California communities. This will be presented at a future SGP meeting. There's a lot of activity also in our community biomonitoring studies in AB 617 communities. Results for VOC metabolites were returned to the East Bay Diesel Project participants. In SAPEP, we've presented in our last meeting how we've continued to work to understand the results. We do have a new lab result as of yesterday to help us interpret the one of the 2 NAPFAL data, but we just got it yesterday, so we don't really have anything to say about that quite yet. And in Fresca and Biosphere, the lab is working on the urine samples, and the staff is evaluating air monitoring and questionnaire data. At the Environmental Health Lab, they have received and aliquoted samples from Fresca and Biosphere. They're also measuring specific gravity in all samples so that we can do dilution correction. And as I mentioned earlier, they're busy working on phenols and speciated arsenic analyses for CARE-LA. They've also made a lot of progress on the method development. They have an improved PAH panel, which just passed proficiency testing. And we're in our final stage of validation, which for our program is to run it through the intra-program pilot study, which is really analyses through results return, which will then enable us to include it on a study. Similar for VOC metabolites, they just passed proficiency testing, which is awesome. And the IPP samples are also being analyzed for VOC metabolites. So both of those panels should be available for studies. Over at the Environmental Chemistry Lab, as I mentioned, the staff is working on our STEPS study, which we keep adding to, so that queue is quite long. For method development, there has been a lot of progress on the cyclosiloxane method for serum, and we'll be going into validation soon. PAHs in serum continues to make progress, and the method to look at total fluorine in consumer products, carpets, rugs, and protective sprays is also going into validation, not a biomonitoring method, but we hope to introduce it into biological materials soon. And related to the lab development, we also have updated our designated and priority chemical lists. We modified the group, as mentioned earlier today. In place of PFAS, it is now PFASs and other substances with a carbon-fluorine bond. And the designated list is also updated to keep us current with the CDC list. And just briefly on the National Biomonitoring Network, this is a conference that was held in January. It's an opportunity to meet with other state programs, work with them to talk about things like participant recruitment, questionnaire writing, analytical approaches, etc. California presented as part of a workshop on results communication. We were part of a panel on PFASs, at which our fish and the drinking water that you're going to hear about were presented. And then we're on a panel on paving the road to a permanent biomonitoring program. You can see from the map, the network has really expanded in the past few years. There are many states working to set up a biomonitoring program and other states hoping to transition from grant funded to a permanent state funded program. And California is the oldest, most established state biomonitoring program. And as such, we're really positioned to provide support and guidance to the other states. We're also, having completed 15 years as a program, really transitioning into a more mature program with established collaborations and methods and the ability to use our data to demonstrate exposures as well as start identifying exposure sources. So it's very exciting to be at this point, and it really couldn't be done without these folks, our amazing staff. And we have a couple of additions to just highlight. Alekia Redham is here, a new epidemiologist over at OEHHA. Amy Percival is an APHL fellow who's joined GTSC, and Sayaka Takakupuk has joined as a new supervisor in Junsu's group. So thank you to new staff. We're really excited to work with you, and thanks, of course, to our existing staff. And that was it. I will answer questions, I think, after Toki's.
Yes, thank you. I want to introduce Toki Fillman, a research scientist in Environmental Health Investigations Branch, EHIB also, at CDPH. She'll give a presentation on the initial results of the associations between PFAS levels in drinking water and serum among Southern California adults. So that you can advance slides. Perfect, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Toki Fillman, and I'm a research scientist with Biomonitoring California. And today I'm very excited to be able to share with you some of our initial results in a project that I have been a part of, focusing on the associations between PFASs in drinking water and serum among Southern California adults. Human exposure to PFASs can occur through several different pathways. So these can include contact with personal care products or consumer products, such as disposable food packaging, cookware, waterproof outdoor gear, or stain or water resistant furniture or carpeting. Also through inhalation of dust in the home, ingestion via the diet, and one of the major exposure pathways is also through drinking PFAS contaminated drinking water, which is the focus of this work. Although California does not yet have maximum contaminant levels for drinking water, last year the EPA did propose national primary drinking water regulation for PFASs, specifically for PFOA and PFAS as individual contaminants, and PFNA, PFHXS, PFBS, and GenX chemicals as a chemical mixture. And the EPA is expected to finalize these drinking water regulations very soon. Studies from areas with high-level contamination due to industrial manufacturing have reported significant contributions of drinking water to overall PFAS exposure. However, few studies have focused on the general population in areas without industrial manufacturing, such as in California. So the objective of our current study is to estimate the contribution of PFAS detections in drinking water to the concentration of PFASs in serum among a general population of adults in California. This is work that came out of one of our biomonitoring studies, the California Regional Exposure or CARE study. So the CARE study was a surveillance study that was carried out between 2018 and 2020 in the southern and eastern regions of California. The CARE study was a cross-sectional study that used a quota sampling approach where the quotas applied were based on gender, race, ethnicity, and subgeographic areas in order to best represent specific regions in California. The CARE study measured 12 PFASs in serum in addition to other contaminants, and also asked participants to respond to an exposure questionnaire covering topics such as demographics, reproductive history, diet, home characteristics, occupation, and hobbies. The CARE study was carried out regionally. So samples for CARE LA were collected in 2018 and covered Los Angeles County and included 430 participants. CARE 2 covered 7 southern and eastern counties in California, was carried out in 2019 and included 359 participants. And CARE 3 covered Orange and San Diego counties, was started in 2020, but had to be stopped early due to the pandemic, and so only included 90 participants. For levels of PFASs in drinking water, we use data from the California Water Board's PFAS monitoring program. So as you can see in this very rough timeline here, between 2019 and 2022, the California Water Board carried out 3 phases of PFAS monitoring with investigative orders sent to water systems. These investigative orders focused on areas with known or suspected PFAS contamination, such as areas near or surrounding airports, landfills, military facilities, as well as water systems that had previous PFAS detections from EPA's UCMR3 monitoring, or the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule 3, which was the 2013 to 2015 version of EPA's required monitoring of unregulated contaminants in drinking water. One challenge of working with this data source is that most of the sampling is from source wells as opposed to finished water. However, one benefit is that the statewide required reporting limits are fairly low. They're in the 2 to 4 nanogram per liter range, which is about 10 times lower than the MDLs that were used in UCMR3's monitoring. This slide shows the steps taken to match CARE biomonitoring participants to public water systems and thus drinking water data. So first, all 3 of the CARE studies were combined together for a total of 872 participants. Then participant home addresses were geocoded in ArcGIS. Participants were matched to a single water system using the shapefile provided by the California Water Board, the System Area Boundary Layer shapefile, a map of which you can see on the right here that shows the water system boundaries throughout the state. Then we limited to participants who were matched to water systems that were monitored during the 2019 to 2022 first 3 phases of investigative order period, and then excluded participants who reported that their main source of water is a private well, as well as participants who are missing key variables for a final data set of 563 participants. To give you a sense of who was in this study population, out of the 563 participants, their mean age was just under 50 years old. They were about 60% female, 40% reported their race ethnicity as Hispanic, 36% white alone, and 60% reported having attended some college or trade school, and 20% reported having a graduate degree. So in other words, compared to the underlying population, they were slightly older, more female, and more educated. In the CARE studies, there were 12 PFASs in serum measured, and in the drinking water data, 18 PFASs were measured. And there was an overlap of 11 analytes between these 2 data sources, which will be the focus of the next few slides. So this table here shows the detection frequencies and serum concentrations for those 11 analytes that overlap between CARE and the drinking water data. So as you can see here, PFHXS, PFOA, and PFAS had the highest detection frequencies and were detected in nearly 100% of our participants. And also these analytes had the highest serum concentrations in the 0.7 to 2 nanogram per liter range. So to put these serum concentrations in context, this figure shows the overall CARE-LA and CARE-2 weighted serum concentrations compared to national levels from the nationally representative NHANES study. So you can see from this comparison that in general, CARE PFAS concentrations are lower than national levels. CARE-3 wasn't included here because CARE-3 was stopped early due to the pandemic and included so few participants, so CARE-3 data was not weighted. But if we do compare unweighted geometric means of CARE-3 with CARE-LA and CARE-2, they are in a similar range. Next, getting into the drinking water data, we found that 47% of the 563 participants lived in a water system service area with at least one detection. So in this map, you can see that in the background, there are very light gray boundaries that represent water system service areas. And in the foreground, participants living in a water system with at least one detection out of those 11 analytes are shown in orange. And participants who live in a water system service area without detections are shown as yellow dots. If we look at the same information by water system instead of by participant, the 563 participants were matched to 70 different water systems, 60% of which had at least one PFAS detection. And for context, I'm adding in the county boundaries as well. So in this map, you can see that water systems with at least one detection are shown in orange, and water systems without detections are shown in yellow. And if we look at the water systems with at least one detection by analyte, we can see from this table on the left here that PFBS, PFHXS, PFOA, and PFAS were detected the most among these 70 water systems. So far, we've looked at serum data and water data separately. So in both water and serum, PFHXS, PFOA, and PFAS had the highest detection frequencies. So these three PFASs were included in the final portion of our analysis to look at the association between drinking water and serum data. We also included a sum of the 11 PFAS number, which summarizes the 11 analytes that overlap between the two data sources. Also, in order to look into the association between drinking water and serum, we needed to assign a drinking water exposure indicator measure for participants. So on this slide here, you can see a very simplified version of a water supply distribution system, where we have water from 3 groundwater wells flowing to a treatment plant before it's flows to the distribution system and distributed to households. So as a reminder, the California Water Board's PFAS monitoring is primarily from source wells for those first 3 rounds of investigative orders, as opposed to finished water. And even among source wells, as you can see displayed here, not all wells in a water system were always tested. So when we started out this project, we had hoped to be able to take the level of PFASs measured in the source wells and then estimate or calculate the final PFAS concentrations that are delivered to households. However, actual water supply distribution systems are very complex, and some may be even more complex than the complex diagram you see here. And so there are many challenges that make estimating PFAS levels in finished water difficult. So for one, again, the sampling is primarily from raw sources and not finished water. We also do not have sufficient information on water blending, mixing, or volume data. And the data collected is not consistent between water systems. Therefore, after working with our water board colleagues and looking into the available data, we concluded that we could not accurately estimate PFAS concentrations in finished water. So given these challenges and the data we do have, we decided that the best we could do is to assign crude categories, which were based off of PFAS detections using statewide required reporting limits. So water systems were categorized into a binary category, into those with no PFAS detections and those with at least one PFAS detection. And we did this categorization individually for PFHXS, PFOA, PFAS, as well as the sum of the 11 PFAS. For our statistical analyses, we log transform the serum concentrations, and we assess the associations between each of the binary PFAS detection categories and serum PFASs using multivariable linear regression, where the covariates included were age, sex, parity, race, ethnicity, education, income, and nativity. Now getting into some of our results, looking into the association between drinking water and serum. This figure here shows the adjusted % change in serum PFASs when we compare participants who live in a water system with at least one detection to participants living in a water system without detections. So if we start by just looking at the results for PFHXS, we can see from this figure that participants living in a water system with at least one PFHXS detection had 32% higher serum levels compared to participants who were matched to water systems that did not have PFHXS detections. And if we also take a look at the results for PFOA, PFAS, and the sum of the 11 PFAS, we can see here that we did not see significant differences in participant serum levels when we compare participants who live in water systems with detections to participants who live in water systems without detections for these other analytes. We are also currently working on different ways to analyze the data, but we are still in the process of evaluating those results. In summary, what this means is that in this general population of adults in Southern California, PFHXS contamination in drinking water may be a significant contributor to serum levels, even in a community without high-level contamination due to industrial manufacturing. And in general, this is consistent with literature published so far on drinking water contributions to PFAS. The results of this study, as well as other similar studies, will be helpful in the development of health protective drinking water levels and are also particularly relevant given that the EPA is expected to finalize their maximum contaminant levels very soon. Addressing PFAS in drinking water can be expensive and can be resource intensive. So these results, as well as other similar study results, will help support enforcement of these MCLs. Finally, I would like to acknowledge that this work was only possible because of strong collaborations between Biomonitoring California and the California Water Boards. Drinking water data can be very challenging to interpret, so our colleagues Scott Coffin and Brandon Ta were instrumental in helping us work through this data. I would like to also acknowledge Nerissa Wu and especially Kathleen Atfield for their supervision and guidance, as well as the care participants, care study team, the California Water Board SABL team, OEHHA, and DTSC. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Toki. And we'll do questions for all three of these first speakers together. Once we hear from our final speaker, I want to introduce Wendy Linck, a senior engineering geologist in the Division of Water Quality at the State Water Resources Control Board, also called the State Water Board. She's managing the State Water Board's response to the PFAS effort in the Division of Water Quality. Wendy graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in geology from Sacramento State University. She's a registered professional geologist in the state of California and certified as a project manager professional by the Project Management Institute. Today, she'll give an update of the California Water Board's PFAS testing of drinking water and other potential sources.
Well, good afternoon. Hope everybody can hear me and see me. I'm actually sitting here in Sacramento, and I appreciate your time and appreciate you inviting me. I'm going to follow up with a little bit more information. Toki gave a great summary of kind of what's going on in regards to what the PFAS testing results are going on along with at the State Water Board. And so the State Water Board, both the Division of Drinking Water and I sit within the Division of Water Quality, we have been coordinating efforts in regards to understanding where the presence or absence of per and polyfluoroalkyl substances are in the statewide since about 2018. And there's been significant effort in understanding the occurrences of both in drinking water, but also at those industrial source areas that Toki was talking about. And so I just want to take a quick moment to acknowledge Dan Newton. He's the Assistant Deputy Director at Division of Drinking Water. He's been instrumental as a leader in this effort, and he'll have his contact information at the end of the slideshow. This presentation is going to provide a perspective on the number of per and polyfluoroalkyl substances that we can evaluate using current analytical testing methods in comparison to the known lists of PFAS. But I'm also going to summarize some of the statewide investigative efforts so far. I'm going to show you where all that data, at least on a slide that Toki pulled from in some cases, and describe some very exciting efforts that we're going to start very soon in regards to understanding not just those PFAS that we can see and targeted methods, but hopefully maybe the entire class of PFAS that we can see in the drinking water supply statewide. So we have this slide. We wanted to really just ground ourselves in regards to, I think all of us understand that PFAS is a very large class of compounds. There are thousands of them being used in commerce and industrial applications. And currently EPA's master list is around 14,000 chemicals or structures. At those numbers, it's going to be very difficult for us to identify all PFAS individually. Currently, analytical toolbox includes targeted analytical testing methods and non-target analysis. Using targeted testing methods, the number of analytes that can quantified against known PFAS compounds standards are about 40. There are some labs out there that are now breaking into about 70 PFAS. But in the drinking water realm, there are, by using EPA methods 533, that's only 25 analytes. In the water quality side, we've been utilizing a brand new method that's available out there, 1633, that gives you 40. And so we really need to understand more than that. The latest research using non-target analysis is expanding our ability to identify those using their structural identity. So our statewide investigative efforts are focused on using targeted testing methods to understand the presence or absence of PFAS that are known and most studied. But we're now moving in a very exciting direction to get an understanding of the rest of the PFAS that may be known using non-targeted analysis in combination with targeted testing. So in order to get that ability, we've been coordinating with the U.S. EPA Office of Research and Development over the past year. We're going to talk a little bit about the data that we found, both in the drinking water side and the industrial source side and the water quality side. And so our approach was to start issuing statewide investigative orders to gather information on the occurrence of PFAS in California's drinking water sources and at those suspected industrial source sites. We identified those industries where we knew that what the highest impact would be and could be found in drinking water and in groundwater. So as such, the investigative orders were issued to airports, chrome plating facilities, bulk fuel terminals, and refineries. We also issued orders to those secondary receivers of PFAS-containing waste, and that includes municipal waste landfills and wastewater treatment plants. The water boards are focusing on determining the extent of those impacts by sources. So this map shows the locations of all those orders that have been issued. In coordination with the issuance of those investigative orders to the industrial source sites, Division of Drinking Water asked public water systems, to sample their wells, their source wells, located adjacent to those sites and in the vicinity of the military. Most recently and excitingly, about a week ago, the Division of Drinking Water issued a new order to public water systems that serve disadvantaged communities statewide. This 2024 order has a specific purpose to understand the class of PFAS in the water supply. The sampling will be performed at no cost to the water system. It is being funded by the state, and I'll provide a little bit more details coming up. So the GeoTracker PFAS map is a really important tool for us to provide public transparency. It was born from the need and the importance to be transparent with all this data, and it's used to view data trends and locations and provides geospatial relationships. It is one of very unique map. It includes all the water quality data as well as the data from the Division of Drinking Water as well. Between the divisions of drinking water and water quality, we have over 10,000 samples collected to date in the system. And with the most recent order that was issued by the Division of Drinking Water, we have over 3,000 investigative orders that have been issued. This graph illustrates the occurrence of PFAS in a variety of source locations based on a range of concentrations and percent detections. Percent detection is on the y-axis, the industrial source investigations and the public water system sampling are along the x-axis. Data includes groundwater along with wastewater treatment plant effluent. The broadest range and highest concentrations of PFAS detected is found at airports, terminals, refineries, and that is because due to the presence of what is called an aqueous film-forming foam, or AFFF. It is used in fire training exercises and emergency response actions. Next are the chrome platers, and their universal use of what they have is a PFAS-containing mist suppressant that is used during chrome plating operations. However, it's not used in nearly the volume of the amount that AFFF, the aqueous film-forming foam, is used. The other sites, the landfills, wastewater treatment plants, effluent, and groundwater have very similar characteristics, being that they are secondary receivers of PFAS. Public water system wells are on the far right and have concentrations with percent detects like those of the industrial source sites like the landfills. The locations of these wells was intended to be in the vicinity of those source investigation sites. So this will be the last graph I'm going to show, and this graph represents what we collectively did in February. Is we downloaded all the data from the PFAS mapping tool and calculated the median concentrations for the PFAS that are listed along the x-axis. They represent groundwater samples as well as from those source drinking water supply wells. The drinking water supply wells is the blue line. The airports, the bulk field terminals and refineries are in the dark orange lines. Landfills and chrome platers, and at the wastewater treatment plants are kind of in that lighter coral. And N indicates the number of samples of each of the sites. So the x-axis shows the PFAS analytes. The Y is a log scale, meaning concentrations in nanograms per liter. And what you want to see in the first couple things that first come out in regards to this is that you have definitely a separation between the median concentrations that are at the airport and the bulk fuel terminal and refineries from everybody else. That is, once again, because the use of the AFFF, the aqueous film forming foam, is used concentrated at the surface and is impacting groundwater. We have some locations at those efforts that have much higher concentrations that are shown by these medians. And below that, you have the rest, the wastewater treatment plants and the chrome platers and the landfill and their groundwater. The other thing that you can clearly notice is that whatever analyte that we say based upon targeted results, we get the same shape. We see the same line. We see the same occurrence. So it doesn't matter where you are at a public water system, or you're at an airport, or you're at whatever, we pretty much see the same analytes based upon the targeted list. If you were to compare that to where the proposed number for PFOA and PFAS, that's at 4 nanograms per liter. That kind of gives you an idea in regards to semi-quantitative magnitude in relation to the public water system wells. Obviously, there are areas in the public water system, both at the source areas and at the industrial sites, that are much higher than this. But overall, it kind of gives you an idea of what we're seeing out there in the water quality and the water and the source wells. So this is a map. This is resultant data from the sampling of the public drinking water supply wells for PFAS. It represents data that is as of fourth quarter 2023. And this is resultant data for the public water system wells at the source. And these show 3 different levels. They are called advisory levels. The Division of Drinking Water issues them in order to help the water system to have to deal with what result that they might get in regards to testing those wells as a result of those orders that were issued to them. So you have whether there is an exceedance, that's in green. Yellow, if it exceeds a notification level, which means that they have to notify their governing board and body that they have an exceedance above a certain level. And the response level. And the response level means that that public water system has to either 1, remove that well offline, 2, either treat, maybe through blending to reduce those concentrations, or 3, provide a public notification to all their customers. And there are currently 4 notification and response levels issued by the Division of Drinking Water. There are PFOA, PFAS, PFHXS, and PFBS. And PFBS we don't see in very high concentrations in the state of California, or let alone in the drinking water. And so that red square means that there is an exceedance of either one of those 3, PFOA, PFHX, or PFAS in the state of California. So in 2021, the State Water Board, we've collected samples from about 9 water wells across the state in 2021. Samples were tested by available and conventional targeted analytical methods and a method called absorbable organic fluorine, using it as similar to a proxy to total PFAS. This figure to the right depicts the results from one of those sampled wells. The sum of the PFAS reported using conventional test methods did not add up to the amount that you can see using the total PFAS or AOF method, and that's represented by that blue bar. In some cases, only up to 70% was not accounted for by targeted and analytical methods in our public drinking water supply wells. This discrepancy triggered the need to understand what is contributing to that unknown mass. What are they? Are they being removed by treatment? And finding answers to these questions led to several events. 1, we've been working with the U.S. EPA Office of Research and Development, as I mentioned before, the leading experts in the areas of PFAS investigation, data analysis, laboratory analysis, and specifically non-target analysis. And 2, working with environmental justice groups to advocate for the inclusion of funding in the most recent budget that totaled about $15 million. So in AB 178, the Division of Drinking Water, using those funds, are now tasked to 1, develop a broad spectrum test method, 2, monitor public water supply wells serving disadvantaged communities within the state. There's approximately 4,000 of those. And 3, develop a treatment-based regulation for PFAS as a class. Task number 1 is nearly complete. We have selected AOF as our broad spectrum test method that we're going to move forward on. Task 2 has begun by the issuance of that 2020-24 order, and sampling is planned to start this spring. We've issued a contract to a commercial laboratory to do the analytical testing. Sacramento State University will provide technical assistance for sampling services and outreach materials for the public water systems being sampled. Locations of these wells to be tested across the state are shown on the map to the left. Data from this effort will provide incredible information on the estimate of the total mass of PFAS as best as it can be estimated, but also the PFAS that are not on the targeted analytical tests, those unknowns. We anticipate that results from the sampling will likely indicate similar mixtures of PFAS in several geographic areas and regions, and likely a list of PFAS that are common or not common in those regions. Based on analytical testing results and any exceedances to drinking water advisory levels, financial assistance will be available for public water system to determine the next steps for treatment. This project is projected to take approximately 5 years to complete, and the well sampling will be completed by the end of 2026, and hopefully my voice is gonna last. Okay, so thank you for your time, and if you got any questions, I'm more than happy to be here to help out. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. What we're going to do now is have 10 minutes where we can do sort of follow-up questions from all 3 presentations that just came before. And then we'll also have a public comment period in there. And then we have sort of a less structured discussion time. So initially these questions should be sort of clarification questions for the speakers, and then we'll have a larger discussion. So questions from the panelists. Yes, Tom.
First question. There we go. My question is for the first presentation, Nerissa, on the ACE study. So I was curious if there's any parallel or complementary effort to actually look at the food types that that people were eating. Right. I mean, you were looking at the Asian community and seafood. It's a strong seafood diet, but was there any specific sampling of the food they were eating?
We did not have complementary fish sampling to go with the study, but we are, and Kelly Chen is here who can talk a little bit more about this. We are doing a lot of comparison to what fish data does exist for PFASs to go back and try to do a similar analysis that you've just heard about for drinking water. One of the things we're finding is that there just is not a lot of fish data out there. PFAS are very hard to, it's obviously very expensive to do PFAS measurement, and particularly for whole fish measurement. There is some data for fillet. There's less data for other parts or whole parts of the fish. So one of the things that the work has highlighted is the need to do more sampling.
While I'm here, can I ask another question for Toki? So on the drinking water study, I really agree with your approach. We tried this thing of, blending and figure water is too complicated to blend. But there's another issue that confounds this, and that is knowing how much water people actually drink from their tap. And to begin with, we actually, it's 2 liters, but on average of fluid that people consume, but it's all over the map, even there. But then when you get that down to how much of that comes out of the tap, and I was just wondering if there's any way to sort of further consider the types of people who would be drinking more bottled water, who wouldn't be using water as much to boil food. There's a number of things that might actually narrow some of the variability on that question.
Yes. So unfortunately for the care studies, we don't have information on the amount of water that people drink, for example, in a day. But the care exposure questionnaire does have a question about whether participants get most of their water from tap water versus bottled water. And we have started to look into some of those results. And so about 40% of our care participants do report mainly getting their water from bottled water. So one of the ways we're starting to look at the data, but we're still in the process of analyzing, is taking the main analysis results that I showed to you today, but then stratifying the analysis by participants who report that they get their water from tap water and those who do not report mainly getting their water from tap. And when we stratify these results, just to give you a little sneak peek, we do see stronger associations for PFH excess among participants who report getting their water from tap water as opposed to bottled water, providing some suggestive evidence that this association is from tap water.
Yes, Carl.
Kind of follow up to Tom's question. He asked about food as a source, and you're studying water as a source. Is water the easiest one to study? How about air exposures? That might be very difficult, but I'm just to get the big exposure picture out here. I'm wondering about other sources.
Yes, that's a great question. I'm not sure if water is the easiest because water is complex in its own ways, and so is diet. For this particular study, we really focused on water, and we didn't include diet, but we have been working with collaborators over at Boston University who are using these care study participants as well, but looking at contributions of both diet and drinking water on serum levels. And for their study, they're using UCMR3 data instead of the California Water Board's drinking water data, but then also diet from the care exposure questionnaire. And they have found that there are very small effects or no effects from diet on serum in the data that they looked at. So in relation to the analytes that I focused on here, they have found that no association between diet and serum for PFOA and PFHXS, and then small effects for PFAS.
Any evidence on air? That's really hard.
We unfortunately don't have data on air. So.
Add something to that. We do have the addresses where care participants lived at the time of the study. So we haven't done this yet, but we could look at proximity to sources if we have a large enough N to see if there's any association between suspect sources and the participant levels.
This is a related question. I think you might have already answered this, but I was wondering whether you had a chance to look at the care participants, to try to look at both the dietary, the fish consumption, and the water exposure together, to analyze that in the same analysis and see which one was more predictive.
Right. So that's actually the analysis that our collaborators over at Boston University have carried out. So they've included both diet and drinking water in the same analysis, and have found little to no relationships for diet, but they have found drinking water relations between drinking water and serum.
And are you planning on doing that for the care study?
Great question. We aren't necessarily planning on doing it, especially because the effects for diet were so much smaller than expected.
And the Boston University is with the care participants also.
Oh, it is.
Yes. Yeah, sorry, the care participants are the subject, are part of that analysis. The Boston University, the difference is that they're using the UCMR3 data as opposed to the water board data.
Any other clarifying questions for our speakers?
Could I just add a correction rather? When I talked about mamas, I referred to PFBS as the analyte that was going up, but it's actually PFBA.
I think the slides were right. Yeah, the slides were right. Great. Yes, question in the back or from the web.
Yes, we have a question from an anonymous attendee for Toki. It says, I'm not familiar with municipal water systems. How different are adjacent water systems in the areas you looked at? Do they get water from completely different sources, or do they just go through different treatment plants?
That's a great question, and it's possible that Wendy may have some ways to contribute to answering this question. But I can say that the water systems included in the care study that I showed today are primarily large water systems that serve at least 10,000 people because of the fact that care participants tend to be in more urban areas than rural areas. And water systems can also purchase their water from adjacent systems and sometimes share treatment plants as well. But I wonder if Wendy has anything to contribute to this answer.
That was a perfect answer, Toki. You got it. It's all of the above. That's why it becomes so complicated with the water system of the state of California and the flow of water. And it can change with which wells they can turn on and turn off, and based upon the time of the year. So, and I would just wanted to add just one thing. There could be a potential idea to use in the future, maybe Toki and other. The UCMR5 data is all data that's being collected at the distribution point. And that includes 29 PFAS, and that data is being collected as we speak and already starting to be published. So it could be an opportunity to maybe update your assessment in the future.
Thank you, Wendy. Yes, we are interested in taking a look at this data as well.
I think that may have just answered my question, which was about finished water. And I realize there might be challenges in measuring that, but it would be really, really interesting to look at finished water near some of these sources, just to know maybe how well these PFAS are removed.
Can you just identify yourself for the transcriber, please?
Oh, Jennifer Mann.
Thank you, Jennifer, for this comment. I think that's a great idea. And yes, something that we're interested in is being able to compare the finished water to the data we're looking at that's primarily from source wells, especially as the UCMR5 data is coming out.
From the water board perspective.
Jennifer, I'm so sorry. Can you use the microphone for the transcriber?
I'm so sorry, I keep messing up. So my question was more for Wendy on what challenges may exist in being able to analyze that, those sorts, the finished water. Yeah.
So we're going to sample water at the wells. That's going to be the first. So we're going to sample all those wells over the next 2 years. But that third objective that will undertake is more understanding the treatment side. What does, and the different available treatment technologies that are available in the state of California, and how they remove, what is the removal of PFAS, not just for the targeted analytes, but for either the total amount or a proxy of the total amount, and those non-targeted analytes. So we will know what's passing through, which I think will be an important thing in regards to understanding any health impact. That doesn't mean that entire all of those analytes are a problem, but we just want to know what they are. So hopefully I answered that question. So we're focused on still at the source wells.
Rebecca, was there another web question? Great, Jose, thanks.
Great, thank you. This question is for Wendy. Perhaps you could share slide number 8 one more time. I just want to get a clarification question here. This is about the differences between the organofluorine, the total organofluorine content versus the targeted analyses for the PFAS. Perfect, there. So, so a couple of things, right? So this is pretty troubling if what you're saying there is up to 70% of the reported sums of the targeted PFAS were not accounted for from the total PFAS concentrations there. For my clarification here, so the different colors there, the green, the yellow, the orange, those are targeted analyses, and those are total sums from different measurements. Is that what it is?
Yeah, those are totals. So we use 533. That's actually an orange. So we summed them all up. Essentially, you can convert them into organofluorine, nanograms of fluorine per liter. You add them all up. And so 533 is orange, yellow is 537.1. We did another, a different analysis, the total oxidative precursor, that's this top assay, that's in green. And then actually in gray is a different kind of method. It's performed by the Department of Defense through the Quality Systems Manual. But the drinking water methods are the ones that are orange and in yellow.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, it's pretty shocking. It looks like we're not really capturing everything that we should be capturing.
That's correct.
Any thoughts about this? Is there something big that we were missing that you can think of?
Yep. And our method, we did a method comparison study just a few months ago. We went back to the same 9 wells that we did here. And we performed non-target analysis and did some selective analyses for ultra shorts. Ultra shorts are the C2s and C3s. They're small, much smaller molecule analyte, and so we're finding out that we're seeing quite a bit of those ultra shorts in our drinking water. So yeah, so there's more organofluorine in the drinking water and most likely in groundwater. They're just not on the targeted analyte list.
And for those, do you have an idea of what mostly they're used by industry?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. There's a lot of, in the PFAS world, you talk about precursors, and I don't know if folks are familiar with that terminology. There are the newer formulations that are out there. Those ones that are on the targeted list are those sulfonates and carboxylates that are actually our terminal N products, where these other analytes can transform into. And so those are the ones that are on those targeted lists. But there are a lot of other newer formulations of PFAS that are being used at industrial sites. And one of them is use the aqueous film forming foam. And so they are the fluorotelomers, and those would be picked up in the blue bar that are not being represented currently in the other bars. So that's a gap. There's a gap there. So
yeah, I mean, this is very it's provocative in some ways, right? It's only 9 drinking water supplies well sampled. Nonetheless, it still provides a lot of insight into this. Any plans on expanding this?
yes, so this is that whole exciting study that will start this spring. Those 4,000 wells across the state, we're going to be analyzing, like getting that blue bar again. We're going to have the total for the 533, the blue bar, but we're also going to do non-targeted analysis, which means we will know what those compounds are that's making up that blue bar. We won't know the concentration, but we're going to know what they are. And I think that's the first step of really understanding what's in our drinking water supply and what's in our groundwater. And then we can move forward, right? We can move forward and figure out what the health impacts are for those analytes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What's that? Stephanie, did you want me to wait before my comment? Okay. The data is obviously very compelling to us as well, and we're very interested to know how our biological samples would compare if we did similar analyses. So for steps, we are in conversations to identify additional methods that we could apply to the step samples to magnify our understanding of not just the legacy PFASs or the expanded list that we can measure, but that non-targeted, the ultra short chains, and try to figure out what's happening, what's the exposure for all these unidentified PFASs.
Let me take a moment to call for public comment, which we need to do in this interval. Rebecca, so first of all, if there's anybody in the room who would like to make a public comment at this time, or if there's anything that's online, and then we'll continue the discussion. So we have an in the room comment.
Hey, everybody. Nancy Biermeyer, Breast Cancer Prevention Partners. And I just want to say thank you to the biomonitoring program for this data and to the State Water Board. This is exactly the evidence we need as advocates to do our work. The state has acted to ban PFAS in firefighting foams, in food packaging, in textiles, and a couple of other juvenile products. And there's a bill this year that would ban all but essential uses of PFAS. There have been studies that shown over 200 different use categories for these chemicals. And this legislation that's pending, and it's authored by Senator Skinner, who represents this part of the world, and it's sponsored by NRDC, Environmental Working Group, Clean Water Action, our BCPP, my organization, and the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, CASA. Those are the people who have to treat the water, and they're all about getting it out before it gets into the water, which is why they are actively working on this legislation. But that blue bar that you talked about is exactly the reason advocates had asked that this method be developed, because we know there are so many different types of PFAS out there. It has to be regulated as a class, and we have to be able to look at total organic fluorine so we know where we are in our efforts to try to clean up both water and ultimately the contamination of the rest of the environment and ourselves. So this data is super helpful, super useful, and we will use it to try to pass this legislation, SB 903, this year.
Rebecca, is there anything online that we should tend to? No. Okay, then we can resume our discussion. I think Tom had something. Yeah.
Yes, thanks. This is in the realm of a discussion point and something, I think our committee has to think about in terms of where we're going. Is there any sense of the time trend on total PFAS? Is it going up rapidly? Is it going up slowly? Is it stable? Is it dropping? I mean, are we getting a sense of that, or is there a way? And again, I think it relates to our committee, because when we pick a chemical class, we're doing it because usually it's on the rise, and we're doing it to see when it quits rising, hopefully, especially with new legislation. So if there's an opportunity to not only look at like what we're seeing now, but a time trend, I think that'd be very useful, particularly if the time trend is steep going up. And then the question is, when's it going to peak, and how do we keep it? How do we get it to slope and turn around as soon as possible?
Well, the hope is in 2 to 3 years, we'll have STEPS data, which provides temporal trend for the 42 that we're measuring with the existing method. But that's why we have set up the study in this way, so that, and we have this, and my previous comment about trying to get this overall mass balance of fluorine as well, because one thing we can understand from the targeted method is maybe we'll see these downward trends. We don't know what else is happening, whether there are changes in formulation, whether there are these other PFASs that are going up. So getting this full mass balance would really help us understand that.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I was, there's like often we're seeing evidence, and I think this was in part of what Nerissa presented, of generally over time PFAS levels declining. But I think that's like, we have to keep in mind that's the PFAS we know to measure, right? And so the gap represented by the blue bar may really represent chemicals that are increasing steeply over time. So I think this data will be really interesting, and it's an important point to keep in mind.
I apologize for the question I'm about to ask, but may we see just for a moment Toki Fillman's second slide?
Okay. I don't remember the math.
Somewhere over there.
Okay.
Zoom. Dang it.
That's the exposure slide. Pathways. Yeah, that one. I think that when I saw that, I was taken by what the dramatic picture it paints. Today, we're discussing various ways of trying to identify and clean up things that are potentially harmful to human beings. What I would like to just go on the record about is that something didn't happen before that factory threw all those things into the environment. They didn't understand their products. They didn't try. And there are legal incentives not to understand their products. And so we're trying to identify messes and cleaning them up when we could have done something vastly more preventive in advance. And we're not doing that. This group, I think, will surely be sensitive to it, but we have to recognize the social and legal shortcomings that put us in this position. That's all I have to say. And I apologize, it's slightly out of the game here, but we can't let this slide go unnoticed.
I just have a more technical question to get back to, although I wholeheartedly agree. And that is, you were talking about the STEP study, you know, and how that's going to be able to give the time trends. Is it possible for you to go back into those samples to measure the total, you know, organic fluorine so that you can look at the trend of that as well?
That's the hope. There's very small volume for these samples, so that's part of the conversation we're having. How much sample do we need? Would pooling be a valid way to look at the samples? These are samples for which we don't do results returns, so they're a little easier to do some of these more researchy methods. And so I don't know, Kathleen, if you want to address it. Some of it is also looking at the commercial availability of some of these for large scale studies to do either ultra short or the EOF, the extractable organic fluorine method, and which one of those methods is going to give us the most thorough understanding. They all have their challenges. They all have their limitations. So that's our challenge right now, is to figure out which path to take.
Oliver, and then Amy, and then we have a 5-minute break scheduled. So
okay. I'm also sorry for my question, but I'm also having a technical one. That goes to Wendy Linck. So I understand that you have chosen the extractable organic fraction and not the adsorbable organic fraction of the non-targeted approach for the PFAS. And what are the costs for that? So is it like very cost effective compared to other methods, the targeted, for example, A? And B, can these used for other matrices specifically for plasma or serum?
Oh, so we have selected absorbable organic fluorine, AOF, not EOF. And maybe I may have stumbled over that word earlier. Apologies there. AOF is a lot more cost effective than the targeted analyses because you're only doing one analyte, right? So you're a couple $100 or a little bit more, whereas 533 could be as twice as much in cost for the targeted analyte approach. And you had a third question. I'm sorry. What was that?
Can it be used for other matrices like blood?
I don't know. That would be a good question. That would be a good, I am not sure. I'm not sure about that, how that work. So I would need to, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question that kind of piggybacks on that, because I was also curious. I know we always want more data in all these different dimensions, but to what extent do measuring total fluorine in both blood and in water might be more kind of cost effective to get sort of more numbers and then have more targeted studies to, to get into the specific analytes? Because when I saw the data on the PFAS, that stood out just because that was the only one that we had sort of the power to look at, or is that just sort of the keys under the street light? So I think this really brings up the combination of the need to do both, maybe.
Great. Thank you, everyone who presented and all of these thoughts in follow-up. We have a 5-minute break now that we were supposed to start a minute ago, and I don't think we can shorten a 5-minute break. So let's come back. We'll start again at 2:31. Thank you.